All right, welcome everybody to today's session here. I've got Megan here. She's a consultant over at Tony Hoty's organization, an expert in not only call centers in her experience here. I'll have her intro herself in a minute, but also in sales and business, really at every aspect of a business as she's running a business here today herself. So just Megan, is so excited to have you on the session here today. And without further ado, I'd love you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background.
Sure. Wonderful. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for that introduction. So yeah, just a little bit about my background. I'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version here, but I have been working in the home remodeling industry for over 15 years at a couple different companies. I built a window siding and roofing company here in Michigan from 1.7 million to this year, they'll finish at about 17 million and really focused on a lot of outbound nebulous lead type of marketing in the beginning. We had a very aggressive show and event program, canvassing program, some retail environments inside of like your Walmarts and your Sam's Clubs, and then also telemarketing and resurrecting those old leads that have been in our database for anywhere from a year to 10 years old and still turning those into viable leads for today. So that was really where I got most of my experience, was at that company. And then I made the leap into consulting a couple of years back. And now I consult with companies all over the country, and I work on, call center issues are the #1 issue that I work with companies on. But I also get in and find out a lot of times we have sales issues, we have leadership issues, we have, more than just lead generation and call center issues. And so a lot of times I get in and we cover a variety of things that go far beyond just call center. But man, call center is just the heartbeat of the company most of the time. So that's where everything kind of flows in and flows out. So it's an important part of our business. Our call center can really set our sales team up for success if we have the right process. So that's where my background is. Now I'm a full-time consultant with Tony Hoty Consulting, and my husband and I also own a retail operation. We own a fence company here that operates in West Michigan. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I've got other content out on social media if people want to check on that, if they want to find out more, but that's pretty much the long and short of it.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Megan Way. You come recommended from the call center side of things, here as well. So I'm your name is thrown around quite a bit in the industry as an amazing person to kind of have on here. So, the topic of today, as Megan kind of alluded to here, is really how do we get better results out of our call center? So we're going to dive into some topics that I've kind of set up here for her. So let's dive right in. So first things first is just obviously speed to lead has been like the mantra of call centers when dialing, especially online leads, shared leads that are out in the space. The question is, a lot of companies are asking, is it, in what context is it still important? But also knowing that your competition has the same end goal. It's not like speed to lead is you're the first one. It's like, well, it's you and everyone else just has the same goal now. So, and they were, you're beating out the person who was going to call in 5 minutes, or 10 minutes or 2 hours from now. So how is that? So is speed to lead still important?
It's pertinent. It definitely is. It's important. It's beyond important. And you probably see this a lot in your business as well. The companies that are able to respond to our shared leads with the quickness usually win, usually find that to be profitable, and usually stay within budget. Unfortunately, if we don't have some sort of process put in to extract this lead and get to it right away, we run the risk of obviously another company getting a hold of it before we do. But more importantly, we run the risk of not being the best first impression the customer can have, right? And that's changed over the years. In 2022, consumers have never been more busy and more in a hurry than they are now. And so we have to really think about their mindset when they are filling out those lead forms online. The customer is excited for their project at the moment they're hitting submit. And so really when the customer is at the level and the height of excitement that they are at that moment, that's when they're shopping. And we have to be able to reach them while they're still in that moment. It's kind of like a sales situation too. The most excited they ever get about the project is when we're in the home going over their options with them, right? And if we don't close it when we're there every day, after we leave, the customer cools down slowly but surely, right? It's the same thing after they submit a lead form. So getting to it in the first 60 seconds and the first 5 minutes is still just as important, if not more important than it ever has been. 20, 30 years ago, when everyone didn't have the internet in their pocket, they would wait for a contractor to call them back for a day. They would wait for a contractor to call them back in a few hours. And that wasn't abnormal. Nowadays, our society is just in a much different place, and we have to be able to adapt as a business to really read the market and be able to follow through with those patterns of, they're shopping now, then we need to be available now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think knowing that other companies they're building systems to try to create a better speed to lead process.
Yes.
Obviously speed to lead is different for what that's a pretty broad term. So I think there's all these studies out there. If you contact a lead within 5 minutes, that you're like 100% more likely to close them as a customer. But how does that, do you see that changing even more down to the minute or down to the seconds that you're able to reach them versus, because as soon as somebody gets on the phone with, the other company, now you might be trying to reach them and hitting their voicemail.
Absolutely.
So any thoughts on that side of things? Has that changed? Has that numbers that you've seen kind of go down from, sure, you can contact with them in the first 5 minutes or the first, down to even shorter than that period?
Yeah. I mean, really, my goal when I go in and work with a client is to get them to respond to these leads within 60 seconds. There is a wide variety of companies out there that are happy with the 5-minute thing. And I can understand why. Like, most of them don't have infrastructures put in place that they immediately get a ding or, some sort of notification the minute the lead arrives. And so I can see why people are still thinking that that's good enough. Well, but the question is, if better is possible, is good enough, right? And so do we have people on staff that can respond in 60 seconds or less? It's so funny because we're really setting the precedent with the customer for our customer experience from the first moment we speak with them. And so customers ask themselves things like, does this company care about me? And if they submit a lead form and we call them immediately within 60 seconds, they think, wow, they are Johnny on the spot. And they start to think of you in a different mindset than the third or fourth call that ends up arriving, right? And hopefully, if our call and our conversation is so pleasant on the first one, when we actually get them, maybe they don't take those other companies' phone calls, right? Can we set ourselves apart enough where they're like, geez, this company sounds like exactly what I was looking for from the first minute. Man, they called me within 60 seconds. They are on it. And so, I mean, think about like what kind of seeds that plants and getting the customer excited before sales even gets there, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and let's talk about obviously it's the positive of you get somebody on the phone and they're like, wow, I just filled out the form, or I just filled the button, or I just clicked something. But there's also the dark side of that, right? If everyone's focusing on the speed to lead and as fast as possible, they go, holy crap, I didn't expect my phone to
bombard
up or bombarded. And how do you, again, when we're trying to make them feel cared for, how do you overcome that, or go and say like, oh, we just, what's the best response to that?
Absolutely. So we actually have at Tony Hoty Consulting, we have some scripted, like little, what I would call a bridge, right? So when someone gives me an initial objection in the first 20 seconds, that's actually not even something we call an objection. It's what I call a conditioned response. And what I mean by that is it's not really based in reality. It's more based on, oh my gosh, I just got 15 phone calls. Oh, you're the third person to call me in the last 10 minutes, right? And all of a sudden I start getting the homeowner who's a little annoyed at all these calls coming in, right? And then how do we bridge that to, well, we still want to earn their business, right? Yeah. So we want to ask them a couple of questions. One of the first things that I like to always do when we're in the call center environment is to get the customer talking quickly as possible. Why? Because if I'm doing all of the talking, they will be happy to hang up on me if they don't find value in what I'm saying. But if I can get them to do the talking and tell me a little bit more, often the homeowner won't hang up on themselves. So I'm able to keep them on the phone a little bit longer to actually buy a few more seconds to hear me out. So often if they start complaining that they've had 50 phone calls from other companies, in the last 10 minutes, and they start, getting a little bit annoyed about that, the first thing I do is apologize that they're annoyed. But then I let them know that while I know these phone calls are probably annoying, this is the first time we've spoken with you. So give me just a second to hear me out. And then I am able to talk to them in a way, because first of all, I empathized and I apologized for the inconvenience that they feel like they're being, there's an injustice happening with them because they didn't expect to put their name in and then get 4 phone calls immediately. Well, yep. Most homeowners assume they're going to get some calls, but you'll get some that are very put off by that. And yep. So we have to sort of minimize the damage and let them know that, well, while we can appreciate that this is probably a little inconvenient on the front end, at least hear out what I have to say, because this is the first time our company has actually spoken with you. And then we do a few things to sort of set ourselves apart from the competition as we get further into the phone call. But we yep. we have to be prepared. That's really the biggest thing that I find companies fail with the failed lead programs, is because they're not prepared. We know the customer is going to say that. We know the customer is going to say something like, I don't remember filling that out. We have customers that'll blatantly deny that they put their information in at all. And we know that's coming. So shame on us if we don't prepare for it, right? Yeah. That's on us. That's not the lead's fault. That's our fault. And if we're taking accountability as a company, that's the case, right? So.
No, I think that's really good to just, again, framing it again as this, it's a bridge, not an objection that you have to sit here and overcome. It's like, if you're able to meet whatever their objection is, or whatever their, response is, their initial response, and just meet it with empathy. And that's, again, kind of going back to that, like our goal is to help you as much as possible. I'm sorry that your phone's blowing up here. We received your information, and this is what we can do to help.
Yeah. And there's some yeah, so true. Yeah. And, they're, just to interject, they're so used to a company getting defensive when they give them an objection, right? The customer is almost looking for it and expecting it. And when you say something more refreshing, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, on behalf of our industry, I'm sorry that these phone calls have annoyed you. Yeah. It's almost like it's almost like interrupting the pattern. It's a different shift in their mindset when you say that immediately. In a lot of our scripting, we utilize that in different scenarios for call center, because it is so important to hear them out before we start pressing our agenda onto them. Remember, it's about them. It's not about us. Yeah. And so we want to make the call about them and their project, and not about us and our agenda, right? As much as we can, we want to serve, not sell. So
yeah, absolutely. And asking those initial questions, I think on the front end of asking like, hey, we're already on the phone. I was just curious. Yeah. Is there a project that we can help with?
Yeah.
And let
which project? Yeah.
And which project can we help with?
Absolutely. I think that is so important in what we do. And there's so many other ones that they give us. And sometimes it's, I didn't fill that out. I never did that. And what we've seen that helps with that is verifying the information and really showing them that if they're not the right person, we don't want to keep calling and bothering them. So often we'll say, well, hang on a second before you go, because they're about to hang out. Oh, I didn't do any of this. I didn't fill this out. And we say, well, hang on, before you go, let me just verify your information and make sure you're the right person, because if you're not, we're not going to keep calling you. Yeah. But if you are, we'd like to have a conversation about how we can help you. And if we can't, fine. But, one of the things we want to do is at least make sure we have the right person on the phone before we go any further. Absolutely. And often, Sean, that buys us enough time that the customer is like, ooh, I'm about to get off the phone. Let me listen. And then they find out it is them that filled it out. And then they find out that
it was their wife or it was their husband.
That darn Joanne. She's always online filling stuff out for me, right? So, that happens. You'll have that. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know in my marriage, I'm the one that normally takes action on the brief conversation we had over here, and then I'm like, well, let's go research that, or let's go figure it out.
For action, right?
Yeah, there's time. There is miscommunication within households. I know I might be the only one, but
oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. It must be a spouse. We say that often too. We'll say, oh, could have been a spouse, family member, or someone that just loved you enough to think you needed new windows for your home. So, there's a few ways we say it for sure.
Yep, absolutely. But I think, it's much personal. If you're able to overcome that by just being a person and seeing and having the that your goal is to help them as much as possible. I think that again is the mind shift set of trying to like take them and tell them what you have as a company and trying to sell them into an appointment with your company versus going, let's see if I can even help you, and having that mindset on the front end.
Absolutely. And that's it. Like the first 10, sometimes we're not even selling the appointment at the beginning. At the beginning, we're selling the next 10 seconds of the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, why should they stay on the phone and listen to what I have to say? Why should they care? Well, they have to see value in what I'm talking about, or they're not going to care, right? So it's got to be about them and what they see as valuable from their lens. So,
Well, I think you touched on a point there too, before we go into the next question, is that, you know, the call center is I think oftentimes, you know, I came from a call center world. We kind of see the call center as like, it's over here in the business and the sales drives the revenue of the business. But, you know, I think you said something early, you know, even in your intro of like, call center is the lifeblood. They are your first point of customer engagement. And, you know, from our other webinars that we've done, it's like 2022 is nicknamed the year of customer experience, and customer engagement is like,
so true.
You know, is so much the case. And if your call center is the first touch point for your entire business, that's pretty crucial. So, you know, how you handle that customer on the front end is going to play out, you know, on every other aspect of your business. So, you know, there's definitely a lot more emphasis and energy that needs to be focused into the call center operation of how it's scripted and how those communications happen. But so kind of playing off of the, you know, the speed to lead process is just, what is the ideal call cadence? So we have some companies who call that lead 60 times if they can't get a hold of it through a dialer. And then we have other companies who are, you know, they'll dial it, you know, 2 times the first day and 2 times the second day, 2 times the third day. And, you know, every system is different. Market Sharp's got some different call cadence set up on that side of things. Lead Perfection's got a different call cadences. Obviously 5.9, if you're using a call center out there, you know, there's all different structures out there, and you can, you know, but I'm curious your experience of what you find is the best call cadence without overwhelming people.
Sure. Yeah. And this is a great question. I get this all the time. One of the things that really depends on, because I mean, I could make a blanket statement of what works for, you know, our industry standard numbers as a whole, but more importantly, you have to look at really what your company culture does and looks for. You know, if you're a company, because we have some companies out here that are very clear on the fact that they're going to call every single lead until it buys or it dies. And, you know, I've come from that background myself. So that's an area where I believe strongly in, because I've seen us converting, you know, 8-year-old shared leads that totally got forgotten about by everyone else. Right. So there's that. But really the key to the entire cadence thing is you have to have a process that you follow consistently. And whether that be 10 phone calls in the first day or 2 phone calls in the first day, you have to have something that gets done consistently. When I watch companies fail, it's because they do nothing consistently. They will say, oh, well, we'll call that when it comes in. And then if I remember, I'll call that back in 10 minutes. That's not a process. That's more of a hope and a wish, right? Oh, if I'm not busy, I will call this back. But like you alluded to, there should be some sort of regimented system that you're following, right? And so what I always recommend is we do a system that incorporates hitting them from a few different areas. So phone calls, yes, immediately my goal is to get them on the phone. However, we also live in an environment where I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that most phone calls go unanswered in today's market, right? Absolutely. So we have to have other avenues that we're pursuing in order to reach people. Texting and emailing should be done not instead of calling, but along with, right? So most of the companies I work with, obviously, we are going to try and get to the lead with an initial phone call under 60 seconds. We are going to try to call that lead back again in about 5 minutes. Why? Because we are going to let those other phone calls come through. If for instance, I didn't get them first, I still want to be able to get in there. So I'm going to try them again after 5 minutes. After that 5-minute time is up, we will try them again later in the day. And then we will start texting. If we don't get them from those initial 2 phone calls, we will then send a friendly text. But the key to those texts too is the content. I'm not trying to have a long text conversation. I'm just trying to get the customer's attention so I can call them and get them on the phone. Then we also want to incorporate email at some point. Wouldn't do it on the first day. We might have an automated system that when the lead comes in, that they may automatically get an email from us, and that's fine, saying, hey, we'll be following up with you shortly, expect our call, whatever the case may be. But after that, I would be emailing them a couple of times that same week if we haven't gotten a hold of them. What I found is usually if we don't get a hold of them in the first day, it's pretty tough in terms of the numbers and the data, but there are still a fair amount of those that can be recovered in the next week. So I end up calling the lead twice a day. I don't call them 60 times a day, but I do call them twice a day for the entire first week after, because we try and get them in the morning and then we try and hit them again in the evening. Yeah. What a lot of companies assume incorrectly, though, is that the customer is always avoiding them. Just because they don't answer doesn't mean the customer is avoiding you. That's what we assume. And that's not necessarily true. It's like anyone else. People are busy. I have 7 kids. When people call me, sometimes I'm in the middle of things, right? And so sometimes it's just making sure you show up enough to continue to make an impression on them. And you'd be surprised. There will be people that the second day you've called, they're like, oh, I know you've been calling. Thank you for calling and continuing to follow up. I just got busy and this and this. And then they take our call and they set. So, really there's not, the only wrong way is to not have a process and not call, email, and text. If you're not doing all 3, you're missing the boat in some fashion.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think you touched on that. Like you can't improve what you don't measure.
Right.
So right. if you can't, I think that's where it's a lot of, if you have a process that's not being followed consistently, then you can't really blame like the caller. You can't blame you don't know what consistent set rates even should be or could be. And those are going to differ by source and by lead, by lead source and by, the type of call it is and project even. You have different competition in different projects. But I think at the end of the day, if you're able to measure what your set rates are or what your contact rate is on every phone call, that's one thing that, again, coming from a call center background, is we discovered pretty quick is that when you call the first lead, you have a contact rate. Well, then you have, let's say you have a 20% contact rate on your first attempt or a 10% contact rate on your first attempt.
Pretty realistic.
Well, now you have 90% left to still process, and you have 90% of those leads still to go. And all of that, you're whittling down the people who didn't answer and throughout that process. And well, you have to be able to measure at what point does it not make sense to utilize your call center's time and energy and bandwidth to make a phone call.
Correct.
And maybe it still makes sense to text them, a week afterwards, or maybe you only reach out to them once a week after the first week. But I think I think the other piece of it too, as you mentioned, is sometimes it's good to have the mentality of going, well, everyone else's call cadences is really heavy on that first week, and then they might start dropping off. Well, if I go longer and I actually keep following up with that person longer as well, you might have way more opportunities sitting on the table. I think the solar industry does this actually pretty well.
Oh yeah.
Solar clients. Is they'll call a lead for 2 years after that lead came in because they know that maybe they would initially started as an inquiry, as a point of curiosity that solar might be a good thing on my home. But then they get fizzled up after they know that someone's got to do a site inspection, or even they did a preliminary bid and it was, I might only stay in my house for 2 years. It might not make sense. But then they're, 2 years later, they're going, I'm already in my house for 2 years. Let's have somebody out here.
Got it.
And so you're able to get people at different stages in that buying cycle if you're able to keep following up with them.
Yeah. And that has to do with your call center environment too. Like the company that I came from, that I was at for 11 years. To this day, they're still resurrecting 8 and 9 and 10-year-old leads. And some of them are shared leads. Some of them are old sweepstakes leads. Some of them are event leads. But what we have is confidence in our process on the phone, that if we get a live voice on the phone and we get to the point where we can have a conversation about any project they may be looking to do in the future, we are confident confident we can convert that into an appointment. So it really has to do with, do you have a script on the phone that will take an 8-year-old lead and turn it into a hot lead today? And if you don't have that process, you may not want to continue to beat those leads down, right? Because it's going to be a waste of your time. If you have a process that's tried and true, and it's proven to convert those old leads because you're using the right, psychology and verbiage on the phone, then, I mean, a lead's a lead, you paid for it. So, you need to be working it as long as you can. But yes, we also have to start thinking outside the box. We have to think of reasons to text and email people that are current and new. Right now, with the gas crisis the way it is, I've recommended to all my clients that we start talking about that in a few different methodologies, because that's what people care about right now. Solar, I mean, yes, natural gas is different than gasoline, but guess what? Gasoline powers the entire economy. So solar is going to become even more important. So many things are going to become more important. And so sometimes those texts and emails to resurrect those old leads, to nurture those leads, if we're using current events and things that people care about in the market today to sort of wrap our message, can be very effective.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think, how many times I've had conversations with companies who have a whole list of leads, but they don't feel like they have a reason to call them or a script to, because the only thing that they can offer them is their product right now. And sometimes you do have to open the conversation with an SMS that is just engagement. That is just, like, hey, just curious if you're still in the market of doing that project, or, and just like friendly customer centric communication, like, one-on-one type of communication with them on a text message that might open your caller up to have that conversation, and dial an outbound call. And then on the follow-up, long-term call cadences, is you have to have a different script for a year-old lead than you do for a lead that, is new and hot right there.
Absolutely.
Your scripting is different. Your objections are different. You do need to make sure that your callers are trained on how to handle that lead and that customer communication versus another. So one, as far as diving into just the caller training side of things, is just how do you recommend kind of separating that? Do you recommend, training one side of the call center of, like, you're going to make outbound dials for rehash leads? Or do you train your callers on everything and you just have different scripts that kind of pop up depending on the lead, the age of the lead, what type of lead, sweepstakes lead versus online lead versus, more of an age lead? Kind of how do you kind of train, or best practices there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really depends on it really depends. It depends on the company, and what I mean by that is there are certain companies that their entire call center is 4 people, right? And so in the 4-person call center, I'm not able to really separate the calls like I would like to based on my caller's strengths and weaknesses, because I only have 4 people. So everyone's inbound and everyone's outbound. So I work with some smaller companies that we're handling both. And then obviously we just have to come up with some metrics that make sense in terms of conversion, taking into account that we have inbound and outbound going. On the other hand, when companies get large enough, which means, they know that they have enough lead flow, enough sales team to keep busy, that we need to diversify that. And we need to have one side of the call center sort of gathering and one side of the call center hunting, right? And the gatherers are going to take these leads that are coming in, that are people that are inbound leads, whether they're web leads or shared leads or whatever it is, people that are actively shopping in the market right now, where the urgency for their project is already established. Like, that's already there, or they don't pick up the phone and act. Human beings do not volunteer for sales situations unless it's a necessity. Okay. No one gets up in the morning and says, I don't have anything to do today. It'd be great to have a stranger come over, measure my windows, poke around in my bedroom at 6 p.m. They don't do that unless they have a serious need, right? So we think about the inbound lead, and the urgency on the project is already established, right? So that's the good news about that lead. The bad news is they're getting a quote from you, but guess who else they're getting a quote from? Several other people, right? And then on the other hand, you've got your outbound lead, your old rehashes, you're resurrecting the old leads as we discussed. Those people, their project is not urgent to them at this time, or they would have acted, or they may have already acted and got the project done, right? And so that scripting for the callers, and that type of caller is more of a hunter. That person has to help create and uncover the need and create the urgency while they're on the phone in order to justify our appointment, because people aren't just going to have us over for their health. It's only going to be if they feel they have a serious need that they need help with, and we can fill that for them. So I have two different types of callers that I really see, and we train one in a specific fashion and we train the other in a different specific fashion. But each company, it really depends on where their infrastructure is and how they're set up to handle these leads. Because once you get to a certain size, you really have to measure outbound separately, because it's way more strenuous on the front end in terms of converting the lead. On the other hand, on those outbound leads, if you do convert them, the sales team has a much easier time in the close than they would on a lead that's getting 5 or 6 or 7 other quotes, right? So there's pros and cons to both lead types, and there really is a different type of calling personality that we need, you know, based on both of those different areas of our business we're both using the call center for. So,
well, and yeah, I think that's a good point. Is I think those are generally different skill sets, even when it comes to even hiring the right person, different compensation models when it comes to hiring a person as well, because some people are really not good at taking that outbound, making those outbound telemarketed, type of dials. But there's some people who are fantastic at that.
You got it. Exactly.
And love that environment.
Chase.
And actually they would be kind of, although they would still excel at the inbound side of things, they would, sometimes they oversell that.
Oh yeah.
Well. So I've seen that happen before. So,
well, and on the other hand, you get the same thing on the opposite side, Sean, where if you take an outbound caller and they're struggling and they really don't like it that much, and you give them these easy leads that are coming in and are ripe for the picking, guess who never wants to go back to cold calls again? Like I was just on a call this morning with one of my clients where, one of the callers I've been training says, well, most of my sets come from these leads that come in that are brand new and hot. And I'm like, shocking, like, yeah, really surprising. And then all the old ones just aren't interested. And I said, well, let's talk about that. Are they not interested, or is that an incomplete statement that we need to elaborate on? Right. And then
I think call center morale and caller morale, it's like, this is a tough job. It really is. It's a tough and most often, in my opinion, underpaid job.
Oh, you got it.
People are doing. So it's true grunt work, and like not everybody's in the mood to go make an outbound phone call.
The hunter is a different personality type, right? Like and it can be trained, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But some of the personality testing that's out there is really helpful to utilize to find out if you have a hunter or a gatherer, because a gatherer will either quit after 2 days in the outbound room, or man, they just hate their life every day, and they won't produce because they just don't enjoy what they're doing. And part of it's in the training. Like, no one comes in and says, oh, I really want to make cold calls today. But a lot of people come in and say, man, I'm ready to get some appointments on the board. There's a lot of opportunity. There's some spiffs out. There's money to make. I'm excited about this. And so it starts with the person we hire, but the training system is obviously just as pertinent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think I'll definitely follow up with you on what personality profile you'd recommend on that side of things. But as I mentioned to Megan before our webinar here, we probably got like 7 webinars worth of content that we'll probably come back to.
We had a good talk. We did.
So moving on here, the next question is just recommended technologies, because we kind of set on, like, again, process is king. Like, you need to have a measurable process to know what to improve. Any recommended technologies when it comes to systems out there? Obviously, there's, Market Sharp's got their built-in kind of manual process, the integrations, as well with like Lead Perfection, Salesforce, and Five9 is very common. Kind of curious your recommendations on just call center technology and SMS tools.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. I get that all the time. And usually people are always asking me, which is better? Should we do manual dial or should we do auto dialer? And the question is, and the answer is, as always, it depends, because it really depends on your company. Again, you have to make sure that this is a process that will fit for what you're doing. pros and cons to each one, right? So when it comes to manual dialing, there are a list of pros that come with manual dialing. There's also a list of cons. Same thing with dialer. When it comes to the dialer, the pros are you take the human factor out of it. Right. A lot of times with our call center, if they're given the opportunity to cherry pick what they want to call and what they don't want to call, they take that opportunity as ripe for the picking. And so we take that completely out of the mix with the auto dialer because they don't get to pick what they call. Right. Yeah. So there's a really positive for a dialer. Obviously, we dial more if we're not depending on the human factor to make the actual dials. We will get more dials in by using the auto dialer. What are the negatives to the auto dialer? Well, you also find that call center people, just like salespeople, if they know there are hundreds of leads coming, thousands of leads coming, they don't try as hard on each individual lead because they're like, I got 5 more dials. It'll be in the next 10 minutes that I can try then. This one's too hard, right? The negatives with an auto dialer, some of them also have that little annoying like delay in the very beginning. The customer hears it. And sometimes we only have the first 5 seconds on the phone to get the customer's attention. And if they hear that we are a telemarketer or any sort of anything that doesn't sound like we're a real person, immediately we're going to get some hangups. So we are going to get some hangups with an auto dialer as well. We have to weigh the options and say for our company, you know, what is the pro going to, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? Is the pro going to outweigh the con in both areas? When it comes to manual dialing, the positives are they get a real human being immediately. You know, there's no question. The negatives are, you know, caller A sees a name in the database and it's someone they went to school with's name that they didn't care for. And so they just skip it. Right. And so, or there's multiple bathroom breaks, or most importantly, they're complaining about the phone call they just had to their neighbor. And so they can't dial and talk at the same time. Right. So you have to look at how well is your call center managed. If you manage it well and your people stay on the phone, you can still have results with manual dialing. I have a lot of clients that do it, right? But there are some negatives where you really have to be a good leader and a good manager in the room, or they will screw around. They will spend time doing, and it's not because they're bad employees or bad humans. It's because we avoid things that are hard. As human beings, we take the path of least resistance. And so our employees do the same thing where they're like, oh, this one got hung up on 3 times. I don't know if I want to call it. Meanwhile, everyone else thought that too. And we really don't know how many it got called. It just says no answer and they go to the next, right? So, you know, that's the con of the manual dial. So either one can be done with success, but I will say that I am a fan of anytime we can automate something, we should. Right. So that's one of those things that I've just found saves so much headache and time in the long run. So if we can automate texting through any of these texting apps, you know, there's 3 or 4 of them out there that are excellent that we can also use in corporation with our database. But the most important thing about the whole thing is we have to have a process, whether it's manual or auto dialer. We have to have a database that we can access the leads easily through, whether that be, like you mentioned, the good ones that I've used, Market Sharp, i360, and Lead Perfection. All of them have the capability to do this, Salesforce as well. So you have to have the database. You have to have a system for calling of some sort. And then you should also have some sort of app that can communicate through text. Having people manually text is really just not effective. It takes way too much time. You know, nobody knows where the phone Mrs. Johnson texted back to cancel her appointment, and no one knows where that phone is. I mean, it's just a mess. So those 3 pieces I feel like are really a key to a good call center process that can get to the leads quickly and can do everything that we're looking to do. So having those 3 pieces in place.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think the base of it, obviously you need to have a CRM of some sort that's tracking every interaction you have with that customer. So you can go back and measure it. You can go back. What was your speed to lead? How was your speed to the first dial that went outbound? Even your dialer being integrated into your CRM is just so important. And
for sure.
And, you know, see that, you know, those 2 things being separated quite often. And not talking to each other. So I think that's very important. But yeah, there's definite negatives of the auto dialed, you know, poor customer experience type thing as well. And, you know, and people don't like that. And another negative that has come up very recently here for companies is this shake and stir situation with, you know, their phone their client's phone showing up as spam likely,
Spam risk.
spam risk. And because when you're using an auto dialer, you're making multiple phone, calls every minute from one phone number, and carriers don't like that. They don't, what they're trying to do is protect their customer at the end of the day, which is saying, well, if this phone number is making that many dials to my network of AT&T, then likely, they're a spam risk.
Yeah.
So I see that becoming more and more of a thing, is that,
sure.
It's just the nature of it. So, that's a big portion of it, things as well. So, and I think there's quite a few different SMS tools that integrate with Salesforce, but some big ones that we know, where obviously we're good partners with Hatch on the SMS.
Have you Hatch?
And they're a good technology to kind of use and implement. Have everything talking to each other.
Yep.
This is a doozy as they go to the next question, as I'm looking at it here, is the compensation structure for callers. So obviously there's different methods, even as we talk about the outbound, individuals that are just telemarketing and calling older data versus the ones who are taking newer data, in live, maybe even inbound calls on that side as well. So just kind of best call center structures as far as compensation goes. And obviously that's going to, the actual dollar amount might vary, but like commission, do you commission at the appointment set, the issue, the demo, or just net sales? Kind of benefits, negatives of what you've seen out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Compensation is another question I get quite often in consulting for that reason, because we have to really, we have to walk a fine line, because we have to pay enough. And especially, right now, Sean, and I think we spoke about this when we talked initially, but the job market is very different right now than it ever has been, right? And so that's posed some issues for us in the home improvement industry, and every industry really, but specifically with ours. So, before, it was not like we had all these jobs and not enough people to fill them. And now that is unfortunately the case that we're in. So we really have to set ourselves apart in terms of our position and how we position that to people on the front end. And part of that is compensation, right? So that's an important piece to address. It's not all compensation, but it is part of it. So with compensation, I always suggest with call center that when we have, and it'll again vary if you're doing an inbound call center, an outbound call center, or a shared inbound/outbound call center. Because what will happen is if you do a shared call center, inbound and outbound, you have to incentivize those older, harder leads at a much higher rate than the easy gimmies that call in as low-hanging fruit, right? And so you have to look at that. But really what I have found is most effective is in either position, we're going to do an hourly base rate of some sort. And, it should be only enough to make them show up. And what I mean by that is if we overpay the hourly, we won't get the performance on the back end. But we do have to pay an hourly rate that's competitive enough that people are willing to drive to our location and work, right? And so you start with the hourly rate, and for every market, that's going to be different. But really what's more important in our position is how we compensate incentive, bonus, and commission-wise, right? And so what I always suggest is that we pay something on the demo. I really, really don't feel good about paying appointment setters for setting an appointment. Why? Because there are too many factors that go into setting the appointment that unfortunately what I've seen is when companies incentivize the set and not the demo, the caller will just throw everything against the wall and hope something sticks, clogging up our schedule with appointments. Most people say, well, hey, I'm okay with that. Well, you're okay with that until you've got 500 leads on the schedule in one day to confirm, and 400 of them cancel and fall out, or are one legs or no shows or repairs, something we don't necessarily want maybe in our business. So I really agree in paying something on the demo. Now for inbound leads, I'm not going to be paying a lot on the demo. There's not a lot of work that goes into converting the inbound lead. There's some, of course, which is why we're going to pay an hourly base plus a demo bonus. But on inbound leads, a lot of times $5 or $10 per appointment that we actually give a full two-legged presentation for is great. And then maybe our inbound caller gets a certain hourly rate on top of that. I'm also a fan of paying an override if they really do a great job at, let's say, the end of the month. I'm really more of a fan on that for outbound, because you have to also take into consideration your budget. As a business owner, it has to work in the budget or we can't do it. So that means that on the inbound side, I have to get a certain amount of demos per hour worked. And if I don't, I can't afford to pay bonuses out. I have to have an hourly base, which is enough for them to show up. But if they aren't hitting minimum standards, I can't pay them the bonuses. So the bonuses are really a privilege and not a right. And that is, if you're hitting our minimum standards we're asking you to hit, then you are going to be compensated at $5 or $10 a demo, right? With outbound, it's got to be different because it's a more aggressive lead that they have to chase and chase and chase. And there's a lot more work that goes into the actual set. So I'm seeing companies on the demo on the outbound pay anything from $20 a piece to $75 a piece. I mean, it depends on what works for you. But again, we can't pay that unless they're hitting minimum production standards, right? So I can't have a caller in the outbound department making $17 an hour and they set one lead, right? And it sells for 30 grand and I'm paying them 1%, but that's all I get out of them for 2 weeks, right? That won't work with my budget. So I have to make sure that they're setting enough appointments for it to work out with the budget. So with the outbound callers, I always want one demo for every hour that they're calling. So if they're calling 6 hours, I want 6 demos, or I want one demo per 4 hours call. Like, you've got different metrics you want to work with, right? So I might say on outbound, I want one set per hour. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I would want one set per hour, which means one demo for every 4 hours worked, one demo for every 6 hours worked. But the demos, you have to have some sort of qualification so that they're not just blowing your budget with one big sale and meanwhile, dragging their feet the rest of the 2 weeks. And you're over here like, well, wait, this isn't working out. And they're over here celebrating the sale, right? So it's got to work for the employee. We have to give them a great income opportunity. And then we also have to have it work for the budget in the company. Because as we know, if we don't stay in budget, we're not going to be here to give them a job. So we need for everything to work out together. I'm also a fan on the outbound because it's not quite sales, but it's a little step up from the inbound, right? It's a little more sales intensive. So I also like to compensate those outbound callers if they do have a huge month. If their leads come and bring in $75,000 or $100,000 in a month, giving them a small percentage of that is very, very motivating for them. And feeling like when their leads sell, the company makes some, so they get to make some too. And so I'm really a fan of that for outbound because it does drive the performance. What we found is what gets incentivized gets done, so.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to have a kind of a quota again, like in the baseline of just, I think what you said there, if like for outbound, you're expecting one set an hour. Above and beyond that, that's where you're, even where you can bonus and where you can, because that's where, as a business owner, where you can obviously, where you're breaking even from your marketing cost and overhead there into profitability, and you can share that obviously with. So we've got quite a few questions. I've been looking at them here as they're piling up here, Megan, for you. So 2 people have asked kind of the same question here of just how long are you able to dial leads specifically? Maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't. But as far as just according to TCPA, DNC lists, all that kind of stuff, I could speak into that a little bit, but I'd love to hear your...
Yeah, go ahead, give us the technical, and then I'll tell you from there.
To be honest, I don't know all the technical things. With every state, it is a little bit different. From TCPA, you do have a length of time that you can dial a mobile number versus a landline. So DNC list is the same way. So every state's a little bit different. Some states have their own internal DNC list, and obviously you have to abide by the national list. So you do have to check with your local regulations on that. So it's the same issue we see with like sweepstakes leads, all that kind of stuff. They give you consent to dial them only for a length of time. Same thing with SMS. So make sure that your campaigns are set up to maximize that. Correct. One thing with TCPA is that engagement of text message, it can restart cycles. So same thing with DNCs, all that kind of stuff in communication. Other inbound communication can increase that or decrease that. One big thing I'll to touch on that though is that in your CRM, you should have an expiration of that lead. And your dialer, you should have an expiration of that lead where you are no longer able to dial them, and make sure that you're following through on that. Again, solar industry is good about calling leads that are old. You'll also know that solar is the most TCPA litigated industry out there.
Yep, I can see that.
Because a lot of solar companies are not following best practices or the law. So do be careful about that, of how you do that. That doesn't mean, I think people often take as an email, as soon as a phone number is off that list, then it's like that lead is dead to me. And that's actually not, you should be still mailing that lead. You should be using automated direct mail, no different than you're using SMS. It's just another form of communication to them, and still drip out content to them, you know, and that if they wanted windows at some point, they might not be in the buying cycle within the first 6 months where you can call them if they haven't engaged, but keep sending them your mailers as well.
Well, I think it's important too to realize, if you are going to run a sweepstakes, if you're going to do any sort of marketing that brings in leads, whether it's on paper, whether it's at a show or an event physically on a little slip, or you're entering it into the iPad, whatever it may be, you have to have disclaimers set up about contacting. Right. And that's really the key. You have to have a disclaimer on that slip, on the back, on the bottom, and this fine print, whatever, that says you are giving us your permission to be able to contact you for X amount of time about our contest or about our products and services. So if you set up your disclaimer, and you can do that on the web as well, there's always like a privacy policy thing that you can put together for any sort of web leads and landing pages you do. There's all kinds of things you can do, but you really want to make sure you cover your bases with being honest about your disclaimers. And I think that that also helps, because, you know, when people do come back and try and sort of pull our card on that, if I've got a little piece of paper that they filled out and it says I can call them for the next year, they really don't have a leg to stand on, because they literally gave us their information themselves. If it's online, sure, they could make a case that it wasn't them and somebody put, you know, but when they physically fill it out and we have their handwriting, you know, we are in a much better place to not be suffering the litigation dumb tax, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, that's, just being, you got to be cautious around that, you know, and make sure you're following all your local and national rules on that, that type of things. And other pieces is just in call center recruiting. Have you find good ways to find like team players, or kind of find good ways to kind of find, I'd say even just broaden the category out there, just find good, you know, callers. Good people.
Yeah, there's a couple pieces. First of all, I am the biggest proponent probably in our industry of hire character and train skill. So what you can't do is take someone who is not a good human being and not of good character and put them into a small environment like a call center and expect it's going to go well, right? So the first piece is, are we starting with the right character of person? For me, and I learned this from my buddy Bob Quillen years ago, they have to meet a certain criteria to be able to work for me in the first place. And that means they have to meet what I call our 4 H's. They have to be someone who's honest. They have to be someone who's hungry. They have to be someone who's humble, and they have to be someone who's honeable. And I put that right in the ads, the recruiting ads. I highlight that, Sean, because I want people of bad character to see that and be scared away. I want people who are going to come in and not be the right fit for my culture. I don't even want them in an interview. So I have certain questions I ask on the phone to weed out bad character and bad behavior for my call center. Because as we know, especially if you're looking at outbound calling, we have to have good attitudes. We have to have positivity. Negativity is the main killer of call centers. One person complains about the last call they had, and then 8 other people want to complain about the last call they had, right? And that boils back down to recruiting. Did you start with the right person?
Yep.
Did you know, is the environment that you've created, is it someone that you would want to work in? And if so, you know, how do we get the right people to plug in? Well, what I've had a lot of success with is young, hungry kids that want to learn business, sales, marketing, or communication. So I found a lot of success actually going to colleges and positioning it as an internship. And it can be, because if you're going into business, sales, marketing, or communications, our call center position will teach you so many business 101 basics that it's going to be way more fruitful for them than any other type of, you know, internship they might get that's not going to teach them real life experience. I like people that are ex-athletes that have the desire to win. If they don't care if they win or they don't win, they're not usually the right person. How do I get a good team player? I can look at their personality test if we give them some sort of personality profile, and I can tell how they're going to behave under stress. I can tell how they're going to behave in a team environment versus working independently. I can predict the likelihood of them following a calling system, because, really the main things that I have found that hurt call center people is when they come in and they try and do their own system their own way, and they won't follow my process, or they have 500 reasons why they think their idea is better. And so I'm really looking for someone that's strong enough to have like a dominant personality to take control on the phone, but humble enough to follow my process, right? Yep. And then how do I get that? Well, I screen out complainers, management haters, and people with attitudes on the phone before I even interview them. I have calibrated questions I ask to draw out some of that information and say, this person is not going to, if I put this person in my call center that's very positive and all these winners that are excited to be here, and I bring in someone who's kind of a ho-hum, just doesn't work out. So
yeah, well, it's going to make a totally different, again, culture is everything. And that stems from a leader who's leading the call center as well, and the intentionality that comes into it.
Yeah. So, and then also verbiage in the ads. I mean, that would be a long conversation, but verbiage in the ad to really paint the picture of what the position is, and more importantly, what the potential is. I like to use the word talented talkers in my ads. Why? Because I'm looking for talented talkers, right? I'm looking for sparkling personalities. I put that in the ad, and I get the people that like to be talking to people. That's what I want. So
they describe themselves that way.
Got it. Exactly. And then I've got a whole presentation I do in the interview that sells them on the job. That's another piece of it. That's a whole nother webinar, but I have to sell them on the job. There's too many jobs out there right now. I have to sell them on why my opportunity is better than everything else they're interviewing for. So that's the other key.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You have to be just as sold out on your position and make sure that that's evident for them to be sold out on it. So one question was from Kyle here, was talking about just, do you, I think it goes back to what we talked about prior to the webinar here, is this remote versus in-house, and is there a point where you kind of graduate people to a remote environment? Do you keep everything remote? Do you keep everything in-house on that side of things? There's kind of the hybrid versus fully remote versus fully in-house. And that's more and more a pressing thing.
I think when COVID, first hit in 2020, a lot of people had to go to remote work, and everyone was very nervous, right? That's kind of the beginning. Everyone was like, oh, how's this going to go? Are we going to get the production? And I think it boils down to kind of the same theme of our call, which is there's pros and cons to both, and it depends on your company. If you have a really great environment and culture already established, and you find a way to continue that throughout Zoom calls, people can be remote and have success. I've had a couple of companies that either I've worked with myself or have masterminded groups, that I've been in, that they built new call centers and then went to remote during COVID, and they never went back. And they said, we've gotten more, because again, when you're at home, sure, there's distractions at home, but there's also not water cooler distractions that you would have at work, right? So there's both. And so it really depends on, are you technologically equipped to do that? Is your culture strong enough that it can transcend not everyone being in the exact same room with each other at all times? Do you have just one person that you can 100% trust that answers the call? Well, if you can 100% trust them and they've proven that to you over time, who cares where they work, as long as they continue that production, right? But, we are running into the idea that so many more jobs right now are remote, that sometimes to a job seeker, that's the most attractive part of it, right? So it's really depending on if your company can handle that. Now, I've had some companies that went remote and they couldn't wait to get back in the office because the people needed the support of their peers around them daily in order to perform. So it depends. It really depends on the people and the culture, but I've seen it done very, productively with a very low cost. And then I've seen, it be completely terrible in terms of ROI as well, because we didn't have a good leader. They just kind of left people out there by themselves making phone calls, and they get a few objections, and then they just kind of sit there and cry about it. And they have no one to kind of pick them up and, push them to the next call and say, hey, you're going to get the next one, Sparky. You know, if that person's not there in your ear, yeah, that can be tough. So
yeah, well, it's a different management, it's a different leadership, it's a different way to be able to you know, it's not like you can just let things go and not have to think about it or any of that stuff there either. But yeah, there's definitely positives and negatives to that virtual environment. Sheila is asking just how many good dials per hour. I know we've got other questions here.
That's a good question.
So we'll keep them going here.
Yep.
But so what is a good amount of dials per hour?
Okay, so I measured this, and this is a great question. Outbound marketing, when I go in and work with a call center, I suggest that they want their people to get in 35 to 40 dials per hour. And that's on the older outbound leads. We characterize older as anything from 30 days old or older, all the way to, you know, I have some companies that are calling 10-year-old leads still. And I want them to have that many dials. I actually timed exactly how long it took to dial someone, get their voicemail, get to the end of the voicemail, hang up, result the lead in Market Sharp, and go to the next. And that's how I got that metric. And then I looked at exact contact rate, how many people we'd have conversations with. Average conversation is lasting 6 to 11 minutes. And I figured that all in with 2 bathroom breaks per shift. Like I totally, so 35 to 40 is the magic number. If you have an outbound, inbound together call center, that number is going to be lower because our inbound people are going to be more focused on fielding, but they'll probably still follow up on leads that are still fresh. So I expect them to have a minimum amount of dials as well. But for them, I expect them to be more at 20 dials per hour, you know, 25. It really depends, again, on the culture and what the lead flow is coming in. If they only have 50 leads in their database to call, they're going to burn through those pretty quick. But those are the numbers that I work with that have made the companies I consult with very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's good to have the expectation there, so you can obviously, one, in the job ad, this is how many phone calls you're going to be making every time, and then you have, again, something to measure against, which is great. Obviously, the number of dials goes significantly up if you're using an auto dialer.
Yes,
but
sir.
That's going to determine on the outbound, you know, versus taking more inbound type warmer leads.
Yep.
And that also kind of answers the questions that Shield had here too, is just how many days old do you consider old data versus new data?
Yeah, every company is so different with that. It just depends on, because some will set up their inbound department where they still want their inbound to work on the newest fresh data for, let's say, 30 days. So they consider anything under 30 days as still a new lead, right? Yeah. Some companies say after a week, to us, it's ancient, right? We're done with it. Some companies say we're having inbound call everything that's up to a year old. And then we're having our hunters and our outbound go after everything that's older than a year, because within a year, like, most of the people have the project done, right? And so the outbound callers then are going to be taking those people that still have the project done by someone else, and they're trying to convert it to a different project, right? Yep. So we're trying to if you have multiple product lines, it's a great opportunity they're going to say, oh, I got the roof done. Oh, fantastic. Now, how long ago did you do that? Sometimes people lie about that too. We want to hold their feet to the fire, but, and then we have a good conversation, and then, well, hey, if you were to do anything else in the next few years, whether it be a few more windows, doors, siding, what do you think's next for you? You know, and we get an answer. So, well, we were thinking about the siding. Oh, fantastic. What makes you pick the siding? And then we have a good phone call and go from there. So, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. So, Kyle had asked here, just how many people should I have on an auto dialer to make that work? I think that's,
depends on how many leads you need. So what we need to figure out is how well, and it goes back, now you have to look at your sales team. So how many leads can you support is the first question. So what I would do is I would reverse engineer the math. The first thing I would do is I'd say, okay, if I have 5 salespeople and I want them to have 2 appointments a day, 5 days a week, that means that they need, 10 appointments per week times 5 salespeople means I need 50 issued appointments per week on the schedule. Then I need to say to myself, how much is fallout after I set appointments? So for instance, if I set 100 leads, how many of them actually issue to salespeople and how many cancel one leg, decide window dork doesn't sound fun anymore, so they cancel, whatever the case may be. So I have to do that math. And then I have to say, okay, if my callers are converting at this number, this is how many dials I'm going to need. Okay, okay, if we're dialing 40 to 50 per hour with an auto dialer, how many people do I need to meet that metric? So it's the path is all math. You know, you start from the bottom and say, how many leads do I need to fill the schedule for the sales team? And then I always then reverse engineer the numbers back from that number, because that's truly the important number. If the sales team schedule isn't full, we're missing something. So I start with that number and then I dial it back.
Yeah, well, that's also gonna, I mean, for an auto dialer to truly work, you need 3, 4, 5+ people on that.
Yeah. Yep.
And that also means that you need, you know, the amount of leads, you know,
auto dial, right?
Auto dial it. You know, you can turn on and up and down your auto dialer, but you know, some companies just don't have a large database of old leads to prospect. You need to see how many leads that you even have to dial through. A dialer is going to chew through them. You know, you can chew through with 5 people. You can chew through 5,000, 10,000, even 20,000 records in a day, depending on how high you have that thing up to. So it's you got to be a little careful there.
Absolutely.
So, but the nice thing about an auto dialer is that all of them come with the option just to do manual, you know, dial to the next lead. So there's progressive dialing and like really auto dialing is, you know, they're calling multiple phone numbers simultaneously and then connecting only to people who actually answer. So there's different ways to do it today too. So at what point do you recommend companies investing in an auto dialer? 10, 20, $30 million in size organizations?
Yes.
Or
I think as you get, the larger you get, the more pertinent it becomes, because you don't have a pulse or a handle on everything. And the auto dialer will help you control, right? It will help you manage all, because think about it like this. If you're a 20, like for instance, the company I came from, they'll do over 20 million this year. They did 17 or 18 is where they finished last year. And I think they have 8 callers and they're still doing manual dial, and they're moving to auto dial now, because they're at the point where it just doesn't, you can't keep enough pulse on enough people. You'd have to hire so many managers, because every manager can only really manage about 5 people, right? So if you know you have to hire all these managers, if you hire the auto dialer and it handles those issues for you. So I would say you should start to consider it once you're at, you know, 10, 15 million. If you haven't made the switch, you should start to do the demos and start seeing what is out there and how it works. And then by the time you're at 15 to 20 million, I mean, sure, you could still manual dial, but that's a lot of management and leadership and processes that have to be perfect in order to make that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Yep, totally. And then what solutions do you have for the spam call? I can kind of speak into that one here. So your carrier, whoever holds your phone numbers right now, who you purchase them from. So if you're working with like a 5.9 and you're buying numbers through them, then you can speak with them and they'll have a solution for you of how to actually claim your phone number, make sure it's showing up with your company name in it, all that stuff. There's a couple third-party companies out there that claim to, like, you know, make your phone number show up 100% of the time as your company name on when you call anybody. There's company profiles. What all these companies are wanting you to do is actually claim your phone number and say it belongs to you as a business. Not every, like AT&T, Sprint, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon have all kind of adopted some of that stuff. And it's very, very slow rolling out. But you need to make sure you've claimed your phone number and associated to your business. And then make sure that your phone number isn't already on a blacklist of some sort, because if you're using that phone number and have been for a considerable period of time, and people can mark your phone as a bad phone number or a spam, then it's showing up to everyone else. So
there's one other thing with manual dial that I'll throw in that might add some value for some of the smaller companies real quick. There is a way that you can call mask. And what we've done with that in the past with manual dialing, if you are still on a manual dial and you're having this issue, there are some phone systems out there that provide an option for you. When you have the phone in front of you, you can click a certain button and it will come from a certain area code. And so you can then position that to call that area's phone number numbers from that area code. So it looks and appears as if you're calling from somewhere local. That works for a lot of companies. Again, you could still end up spam risk likely, but it's much less likely, especially when the area code that they see you calling from mirrors the area code that they have. So, that is one little tool I've used that's worked, because we have the last company I was at, we had a 7-hour service area. I mean, it was super big. And so there was 3 or 4 different area codes. And if you didn't call from this one specific area code for this one specific area, they knew you weren't local and they didn't want to talk to you. So, there's that option too. That helps a little bit. That's just one little tool that people could look into call masking.
Yeah, absolutely. Having multiple phone numbers, and I think, and also having kind of a pool of phone numbers that you use as well, so you're not overusing one phone number is important.
Very important. Yeah.
And then Rick had the question here, which we'll wrap everything up with, is just how much do you pay a call center manager? I think one thing we didn't talk about here that you stressed here is that obviously hiring the right leadership changes culture. That changes who you hire and how you compensate and all the different pieces to make it work. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And again, every market, it depends on what's, in California, cost of living is much different than in Michigan where I'm at, right? So you may have to offer a lot more base salary wise to get someone there than in my market. But in most of the Midwest, which is where I do most of my consulting and work, most call center managers we see that are doing well, we're seeing anywhere from 50 grand a year to 70 grand a year with bonuses, salary, incentives. And usually with call center management, I always do a bonus over the team performance. Obviously, I would like the call center manager to lead by example in some respects, but more of their job is really focused on developing people and training and coaching, right? And so I want to really incentivize them to do that. So I really want them to earn their money through their people becoming better. And so, we usually do we do a base salary of some sort. Benefits are obviously key right now because of all the opportunities out there in the job market, but then also being able to offer an incentive plan that when our call center hits their goals, smashes their goals, that the call center manager is really feeling that they were a big part of that and they deserve that they should be compensated that way. So, 50 to 70 grand is a good call center manager pay structure if they can come in somewhere there. I've seen call center managers make way more than that in large scale, but if we're talking mid-range companies, 3 to 10 million, 3 to 15 million, that's where I've seen the sweet spot that you can make it happen. But again, it's got to be incentivized properly in the right fashion so that you get the right result. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's great. Megan, thank you so much for your time. We've had a ton of questions, a lot of interest in this webinar that we've had here today. Megan, how can people reach you if they have more questions here for you?
Yeah, great question again, Sean, to finish it off. You can reach me by email at megan@tonyhoty.com. So that's MEGAN at Tony Hoty, TonyHoty.com. So that's my email address. And then if you contact me there and want to get information on how I can help or just want to ask me some questions, whatever it may be, go ahead and start there. And then we can move forward from there and move to a phone call if you'd like. So.
Awesome. We'll drop that in your email address in the show notes here too, so they can get a hold of you.
Wonderful.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for your time. We went over. This is the longest webinar yet with the most questions on it. So thank you all for joining us here today. Reach out to Megan if you have questions. But yes, we'll send you this recording off within the next couple hours so you can send it to your team. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.